Misfits 008 is crazy, and I love it. What do I mean by that? Coming at you right now. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to my V-Boxing. Brandon Herrera versus Action Man. I wouldn't usually judge a fighter based on their physique, mainly because of Deji. However, because I don't have a whole lot to go off of, I gotta go with what I got. Out of the two, Herrera looks to be in better shape. On the other hand, Action Man, yikes. Of what I've seen, Herrera is a Southern gun guy whose friend, Jake the Viking, had an amazing Misfits debut, and I would guess they're training together. Again, just guessing. I don't have a whole lot to go off of. Action Man, of what I can tell, is an internet troll that, besides the boxing training that he's doing for Misfits, has no prior training history. Based on that, I'd have to go with Herrera, because granted of what little I've seen, Brandon Herrera seems to be the more prepared in this matchup. Again, I don't know, I'm guessing. There's not even any sparring or boxing footage period from either dudes, so it's a bit iffy. Now, Street Fighter 2 versus OJ, Rose, and Kimbo Slice Jr. I've gotta say, both Dean and Crocker have good jabs, decent power, and solid timing. Now, Dean does have a problem with balance, and both Dean and Crocker get caught with shots that shouldn't be catching them. However, I do believe their combined experience is going to make up for that in droves. Now, Kimbo Slice Jr. does seem to be comfortable in the ring and can switch stances, but he doesn't really have that technique that he's going to need in this fight. In fact, he tends to paw out his punches a lot. By the way, pawing out punches is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a cat that's pawing at something, and whenever you're throwing more like a cat is swatting at something instead of straight, solid, structured punches. On the other hand, OJ Rose has solid head movement, guarding, judge of distance, and footwork. The only thing is he really dilutes his power because he has a problem not turning into his punches and getting full hip rotation. With the combined experience of a Misfits champion and a Golden Gloves champion, Street Fighter 2 has everything that they need to win, and I got a feeling they will. Belcher versus Hasim Rahman Jr. To give a bit of background, Belcher is the current BKFC heavyweight champion, and Rahman Jr. is a professional fighter with 12 wins and 2 losses. I honestly believe Belcher is gonna get flattened. Before you yell at me, let me explain. Bare knuckle boxing, while rooted in regular boxing, is closer to the UFC in that you can use holds that are very illegal in regular boxing. A good example of that would be Muay Thai holds. Belcher also isn't very used to using the size gloves that they use in Misfits. I mean, BKFC only uses hand wraps while Misfits uses 10-ounce gloves. Also, while only using hand wraps, Belcher throws frighteningly slow for someone with his record and got knocked down quite a few times in his last fight. And not only has Rahman Jr. been in the regular boxing game longer, even while fighting a much heavier opponent in Greg Hardy, he was outboxing the mess out of him in the early rounds. Unless Belcher ends up outweighing Rahman like Greg Hardy did, Rahman Jr. is going to beat him with his good defense, fast hands, and his pro footwork. Now to the people's main event, Anthony Taylor versus Paul Bamba. What a matchup! Woo! Anthony Taylor just came out of a solid win against Salt Poppy, had a solid game plan, stuck with it, ducked so low I was scared he was going to hit the floor, worked really well in the clinch in his last fight, and his power is nothing to sneeze at. I will say though, Anthony Taylor does have a history of cardio issues, and his punching technique isn't the best, but it is what it is. And while Paul Bamba did show some dirty boxing in his last fight, his guard and defense have great potential, and if worked on correctly, they could pose a decent threat. Even with that praise to Bamba, I don't know if he can correct himself quick enough to take down a dominant pressure fighter in Anthony Taylor, and if Bamba isn't careful, he could get knocked out in the early rounds. Finally, here comes the Survivor Tag Match, the actual main event. This right here is going to be a lot to cover, so buckle in. By the way, I did have to write some notes down here because there are a lot of possibilities that I gotta cover quick. With nichlmao, he has a decent jab, can circle away from his opponents, has some decent timing, and throws in volumes. However, he stiffens up way too much and has issues in structuring his punches in a way to maximize both speed and power. Now, swarmz has okay footwork, feints well, and has some kind of power. He did break Ryan Taylor's orbital bone, but he's way too hesitant, and he doesn't deal with pressure well at all. I mean, he gave up the center of the ring way too easy, even in his Ryan Taylor fight. And I promise you, I'm not trying to be demeaning at all, but BDave's only good when his opponent doesn't make an effort to fight back, and when they let him pressure. I mean, that shows especially in his fight with Pineda, who didn't throw with speed, but was able to work around BDave with little to no pushback at all. The main two things BDave has to work on is his technique and some kind of defense. With Ryan Johnston, he has an okay jab, and that's it. From his last fight back in 2021, his technique was abysmal. He hesitated even while he had had his opponent in the corner, had his chin looking at God, and had no structure in his punches. The only thing you can give him is maybe power, but he'll have to improve drastically to last in this match. Going to who I believe will win, nichlmao is easily the most skilled fighter in that matchup, and I could see him picking the other three apart. swarmz might be able to get some redemption in this unless he fights Nick or he shells up like he did in the Deji fight. As funny as BDave might be, the only one he's outclassing here is Ryan Johnston. He may be able to pull it off if swarmz shells up again. He'd probably out-pressure Johnston, but he currently doesn't have the technique needed to take on nichlmao. Lastly, I will be very surprised if Ryan Johnston lasts against any of these guys, let alone win. Unless he's gone through some Rocky Balboa-esque transformation, he's getting demolished by Nick, rocked by swarmz, and pieced up by BDave's pressure. If you haven't already liked, commented, subscribed, the worst thing that's gonna happen is I'm probably gonna cry myself to sleep tonight, but if you don't click on this next video, BDave's gonna hug you in your sleep. Talk about a wild card. Man, my head hurts.